Okay, hey everyone. This is going to be yet another Diablo 4 beta review video. And basically, I'm just going to go through a pile of notes that I actually have for this game. And honestly, I was going to try and have it running in the background, but the game seemed to freak out every time I tabbed out of windowed mode and tried to do something else. So it crashed multiple times, and I just, have resorted to putting the website up around here. So that's what's going to be up. But anyway, what I want to kind of preface everything with is it's pretty decent for what it is, and I want to stress, asterisk for what it is, but it does need work. Um, I'm not also asking for this to be Path of Exile because I don't need or want another Path of Exile in my life. That has its own place, that has its own complexity, and that will always be what it is. And, nothing else needs to really measure up to it in terms of the stuff that it has. So just kind of keep that in mind all the way through. And also, I didn't think this whole couple of test scenarios was really enough to gauge the whole game. And I'll get to that in my final notes as well. But um, yeah, I overall don't know why they keep it, so limited. But anyway, I have a few sections of things I want to talk about. And really starting with the graphics, I'm going to try and divide this up as best I can. So in terms of like the animation, cinematics, skills, and effects, I am not going to really talk about it because, even Blizzard themselves has spent so much time telling us, how they did everything, what inspiration went into it. Great, amazing. That's what we expect out of Blizzard. And I don't need to say anything else about that. So I'm not trying to say it's irrelevant, but for the purposes of my review, I'm leaving that out just because, like I said, it's a baseline expectation, so we're not going there. The second side of that is the UI elements, the HUD, the menus, key bindings, that sort of shit. So essentially, the first point I have is that information is scarce when you're trying to evaluate things that are happening to you. Essentially, it would be good to have like an icon with a timer that tells you you're poisoned or something instead of just this little awkward effect off to the side on your health globe that might shrink a little bit. So, because of that, it makes it hard to judge how long the effect is going to last, how big the effect is if you can't see the real amount of health that it's chunking off, and it's very hard to judge. Pretty much. So, like I said, if they could have just some clear icons, even along the bottom in a visible area, that would be great. In terms of the map and things like that, it would be good to have an overlay, like D2 style, just transparent, nice and opaque, nice like opacity, telling you what portion of the map has been revealed, so you can kind of have a better idea of where you're going, because it's hard to switch out to the overlay that is there now because you can't move and you're just looking at a marker and you have to kind of like coordinate and juggle the two pieces of information. um, it also goes along with the UI labels, uh, for icons in the world anyway, being kind of limited. I noticed that they don't highlight the target more than they only highlight the general area that the thing is in. So in the early going of the game, you asks you to find a cabin, for example. There's this big chunk of area, and only until you get close to it does it really start like saying, okay, yeah, here you are. There's another instance in the early game when you're going through some catacombs, and really the answer to where you need to go is a ladder that you climb down and continue through the area, but it doesn't highlight that at all. It doesn't give you any of that vital information. So I actually got stuck there as well as other players because there was no clear sign of like, I got into the area, okay, now it's pinging me to go here or telling me to do another thing because the NPC was also staring at the door that I couldn't go through. So, like I said, that type of thing does need to be cleaned up. In terms of the quests themselves, it would be good to be able to track more than one thing. In the beta, it actually has the Act 2 and 3 quests in your log, but you can't do them. And really all it allows you to do is one mainline quest and one like blue square thing, which is one of the side quests. It'd be good to have more. It'd be good to be able to untrack them and track more of them, for example. But yeah, that definitely needs to be made a little more obvious. And I think for the map and that related stuff that's done, in terms of the key bindings, that was kind of disappointing. They had said through their blogs and social media combined stuff that they were trying to decide what beginning attack to give the player, and they didn't actually put a basic attack into the game until way late into development, which kind of surprised me because a lot of the competitors out there do have left mouse button, rebinding, movement only, that sort of thing. So with it missing from the game, you're stuck kind of in this weird area where you're going to attack something if you're walking to it. And then the force move isn't much better because in Diablo 3, what people did was bind it to their mouse wheels so that you could just plot a path and quickly and easily put in a lot of inputs and it would take you to where you go. So it also solved a lot of pathing issues in D3 because most of the time your character would just naturally path around something rather than you clicking and your character not moving very far. So that was a solution to one of those problems. And in Diablo 4, you can't seem to actually make that work. So yeah, those actual like quality of life changes where you would have more than the 6 skills on the bar, a little more surface area to have only a movement control or even a movement skill. All the game has currently is an evade, much like a Lost Ark or some other more modern RPGs. They just bind it to space and it's on a cooldown, and you basically get to just like jump or roll or dash forward a little bit, but it's not a separate movement skill. It's just an evade. It's not like, dash or flame dash or like a teleport that would be specific to a movement skill because, Sorcerer has teleport, but that's, again, separate from the point. Not every class has a way to move around by default, and that makes it slow and kind of clunky if you're not a class that's fast anyway. I found with some of the with some of the inputs I was using in my keyboard and mouse control, some of them would get lost. The game also tried to default to maximum resolution, and that caused a lot of stuttering until I turned it down. I'm going to get into some of the other controls as well, but in general, I felt like the UI was very prohibitive in fixing a lot of problems. Like in Path of Exile, I could still run full screen full screen borderless in a window at 1440p, but this doesn't let you do that, and it still doesn't let you choose which monitor that you actually want to run the game on. So I had to make it a windowed game, move it over manually, and expand it. So I don't know why this tech isn't actually available in Blizzard games at the moment, but I think they really dropped the ball on that one, and they really need to look into how to make that actually work, because it's 2023, it's not 2012. I don't feel there's any excuse for it. I felt that the icons for the skills were just kind of a color wash. They just kind of had, an elemental theme to them. Like Sorcerer's blue skills were much more ice and lightning, but they had a different hue for each of them, but they were still both blue, and then Fire had orange, and it was just like a little sort of mosaic, kind of stained glass sort of illustration of what was going on, and that has carried through the whole game. So I didn't feel that it was really complete, I guess, is the best way to put it. There's also some keybind clashing going on. If you're in the overworld map or you have the journal available, Q is your potion, but also Q will hide the journal panel. So things seem to get a little messy at that particular point. Yeah, there was a pretty easy transition to my PS4 controller. It showed the right icons and inputs. That actually seemed to work a little better at times, but I'm not a great controller player, so I had a bit of struggle with where they placed the skills, and I didn't rebind it in a way that made sense. But I have actually submitted feedback to say that they should pick some areas of buttons, so you're not like skill, and then like here, and then just some random button without having, an area for your hands to go, because usually one side is classically movement and the other side is your skills, and you have like easy access to like the exit and whatever. So I said, hey, why don't you use the, left and right ones, um, you know, twos, and then the clicks for the, you know, actual toggle sticks. Or just like say, hey, all the R1 and R2, L1 and R2 are skills on the 4 panel piece of the bar, and then, two other buttons on this side are your other two skills, and then that's it. Instead of spreading it out, which it felt like it didn't seem to really synergize that well. It felt like my hands and inputs were kind of all over the place. So in that sense, it felt messy, but it was responsive and it did auto target. So again, with respect to that, that's fine. Skill bindings, I was gonna try and find like a proof of concept of this, but I felt it a little clunky. It seemed that I had to drag and drop to certain areas, but I would like to see if I can just click a region in the skill bar and pick a skill from like a little pop-up window that I can bind to it without having to like click and then drag and then have to rely on that gesture. But again, I really need to retest that particular thing. The queue is about 30 minutes right now, and like I said, I was having problems with the game crashing and having my recording activities happen at the same time. In terms of gameplay, overall good, but all the things I talked about previously kind of make it difficult. There's also kind of a problem with density. Things come at you in small groups, and then you just sort of deal with them, and then you're walking along and just being like, okay. I think they really need to look at how they handle density of effects on the screen and mobs. And like to that effect, a lot of the fights are much easier for ranged classes. So I had a way easier time on my sorceress getting around one of the first mini boss fights when you're saving the NPC's mother, and she's spawning the like succubi around you in like 2, 3, and 5 or something like that with the oppressor that comes at the end. With my druid, I had a hard time actually getting to the mobs because areas of the map that were stairs on the sides would turn into areas that you couldn't get into, but the mobs would float there. They would just continue into those like danger areas I couldn't get in range. That's a little bit up to me in terms of the skills I was using, but it just highlights the difficulty of having a pure melee character and how it could get a little weird if you don't have something ranged on your bar, right? It just kind of feels too necessary in that instance. The actual like hits themselves are fine. You see a lot of good effects. The telegraphing of attacks coming in is pretty good. But like I said, in that one fight instance, I would say that there was too much clutter, especially for a slow melee class like the druid. It got frustrating fast, and that was like one of the like only deaths I experienced really well leveling a couple of times actually. because I was kind of forced out of the whole fight to start it again and re-experience that frustration. Like I said, I'm not looking for them to, make it easy to the effect that I can just go and one tap it. All I want is for that balance to be checked, to make it, so that those NPCs can't go into those unreachable areas, or they can only be in a certain range or move a certain amount, like other mobs in the game. Like there's a vampiric mob kind of guy who will turn into bats and go to an area, stop there, and you can actually engage him, right? In this fight, the succubi have a stagger meter, so you have to knock them down, and then you can do damage, but it's slow, especially at level 9. Also, to the effect of like having the levels of content, when Ashava first spawned in the original beta weekend last week, any level of player it seemed could get in, and that just kind of ruined the whole thing because, as usual, people who are low level want to come in and try and get a carry, but no one person is really like strong enough unless you have like an overpowered build at high level to actually take care of that, level of DPS that's in front of you. I mean, in terms of like actually killing the monster, not taking the DPS, but like actually dealing it. What else? I also felt that separate to that particular problem, when you get to a town, all the NPCs are spread across the entire town, which makes it difficult. So you have to go in a house for one thing, in another house for another thing. So if you're going back to town and what you want to do is, for example, salvage your gear, check your wardrobe, and go to the jeweler, you have to go clear across town because you have to visit one hut in the front area of the town. Another one, go upstairs to your wardrobe, and then come back down and go to a completely different area for the last thing. So if they could like make a smaller hub and condense it and just have like NPCs in the extended area that are just there for flavor or offering side quests, that would honestly be the best option because you go to town a fair amount and you're going to be in certain areas doing different things, especially through the campaign. And those towns are a key part of the experience. So rather than adding like whole minutes or what have you to the interaction, just, my only comment is make it easier to do that. In terms of the events, dungeon sellers, and side quests, I felt some of the side quests were understandably very short. Some of the objectives were so cheesy to be like, hey, go cheer on the soldiers, and all you have to do is emote. Which, I mean, that part of the UI was weird to discover in itself, but that's another thing. The dungeons in the game didn't really offer much variety, and they felt extremely tedious because it felt like you needed to do the same actions too many times. So, for example, there were dungeons with bloodstones that you had to take to certain altars. Some of them required 2, some of them required 3. But you couldn't just pick up all the bloodstones and make one trip. You had to go each single one. Your player didn't put it in their inventory, they put it on their back. So it wasn't like they were using the stash space constructively at all to, gather 3 items at once. It was, okay, well, I need to walk all the way over here, walk all the way over to this place. Oh no, I missed the third one. Now I have to go all the way back. And then go back to the center. So you're going up and around, back, up to the second thing, back, to the third thing, back, fighting mobs again, and just extending that whole thing for way longer than it needs to last. And, a lot of the dungeons were pretty much the same thing. I couldn't really tell you, if there was a very clear difference. Yeah, so I talked about every point there. So going on to items crafting and trading. we got some confirmation on Twitter that legendaries have been tuned up for the moment, so you're finding them more often just for beta purposes, which is good. I like a little bit of scarcity. I want to be able to actually be excited to find an item uh, at some point. The only problem is with legendary items, they don't carry too much weight to them. Sure, you can find them, sure, you can use them, but really it just amounts to another rune or an essence or another affix on an existing item, especially if you find something better than that legendary. So, really, they turned it into kind of a upgraded rare to try and make them count, I suppose. But, having an item tier that is basically just another salvage fodder like Diablo 3, where, you know, in this current meta in D3 that I last played, now it turns into upgrade materials to make your current, ancient legendaries primal to bring them up a tier. But this is kind of the same thing where it's like, I just want the effect on another piece of gear. I don't see a point. If you're going to make items, make them count. That's my only commentary on that. Especially if you're involving trade in the whole thing. Items need to have value, and if uniques are the only place where you can find any sort of item value, because the game is kind of like a simulated solo self-found anyway, I just don't see a point. Like, it's already a little bit of a salvage fest because you can go through your gear, find a lot of items on the ground that aren't going to help, and all you do is go back and you know talk to the blacksmith, click the button that says salvage all, and you're done. It might point something out as a special item because you got it as a quest reward, but it's still junk at the end of the day. um I think the game puts a little bit too much focus because of how irrelevant some items feel on getting into the combat. I don't feel that they have enough decision making in terms of your gear, because really all you're looking for is a currently in the level 25 experience. And let me just clear that up. So currently all you're looking for is, oh, it increases my damage or my armor or a stat that matters, and that's it. They've added some good stuff in terms of like implicits. You can find what basically amounts to a 2-stone ring with a socket, which is fine and dandy. They do decent things, but a lot of the sub affixes to that are just pointless things or just wastes of time. So I might find an item with a lot of resists on it, but it will say something like extra damage to ranged enemies. But if I'm a melee character, that doesn't do anything for me. So it's like, why is that even in the pool, and why is it going to roll if it's not actually being smart about what goes on the item? It just seems like they're a little too random, and it's very easy to throw things away in that sense. I also didn't really find that much crafting. There is a kind of a pseudo flask system. Basically, they give you a potion slot. You have a health potion, you can upgrade it. And then there's an alchemist where you can buy additional elixirs that have different effects, like defensive or offensive. But you have to go and gather materials for it, which is fine. It just adds another thing that you need to keep an eye on, that the game had to like tell me um what was going on. And as with the something in as with the flask system in Path of Exile, in this, it's not like you automatically gain charges on a kill. You actually have to walk over to the thing to pick up the flask charge, and it's not like you're picking up another flask, it's just a use of it, which seemed kind of pointless to me. So, like, why do you need to add this extra dimension of wasted movement time, like I was saying in towns, for example, to the game, where not only do I have to concentrate on evading an attack, but I now have to add the extra dimension of, is it worth it to go and pick up that flask charge, which it obviously is, because you don't have that many of them, and it makes a difference. So it's not like you're trying to be greedy with items. It's just, you have to then add that sort of thought process, and it can be kind of like, again, really weird and paralyzing almost. Um, yeah. So I talked about trade. Not really crafting, implicits, yeah. Yeah, I guess that leads me to my final notes, really. Calling this a beta is like the only way to go. Personally, I think there's a lot of runway ahead of them in terms of quality of life, managing UI cues, letting the user have access to more information on the HUD, making things more obvious, cleaning up the uh, um, key bindings, doing a little more work on the skills, maybe giving them more flavor in their icons, something. But like I said, there's still a lot to do and find out. And that's kind of my real point of contention here is we don't know what happens past level 25. As far as I know, there was a test of the endgame systems early on, but I wasn't part of it, and people are probably still under NDA, so it's unclear what kind of issues people will really run into, because now we've only seen basically Act 1, much in the same way we only saw Act 1 in Diablo 3, except that was up to a mini boss in level 12. So sure, there's more coverage here, but um, I didn't think it gave enough context into what everything means in the long run, because that's really the goal of these games, is to get past that rags to riches type of journey to make your character powerful. Then you're getting into what does the Paragon board mean, because we can't unlock it until level 50, so that's completely restricted. Our skill tree, again, limited to 25 points. What do you do after that? Like, we don't know, even though it looks very straightforward, what any of the end game impact is going to be like. And then also looking at gold as a resource, you use that to respec currently and also repair your gear. So, it's going to be interesting to see what the scaling cost of all of that is, running into the end game and looking long term. But, I can't go and call this game amazing because there's just way too much information missing. And I really wish that they would um, take the blinders off of important things that people want to know and see and playtest, because if we're only in zone 1 of 5, how do you know there's not a game breaking bug or side effect to the player leveling curve that happens later? How do you know that all of the affixes for mobs have been tested? How do you know that your density and scaling work beyond that threshold? It's just a lot of like completely untested, what the heck is going on kind of questions where I don't know. And that's, what's kind of messing me up. It's like having good combat is only one portion of the game. Having nice graphics is only one portion of the game. There's still a lot more to go. And for that reason, I kind of disagree with the price along with the model they're pursuing, because you have to pay a price for the base game. As far as I know, you have to pay for expansions, and there's going to be a shop, and there's going to be more cosmetics to buy, not loot boxes, but actual just like armor sets and things like that. So with the stuff you get for free, you could probably make your character look just fine. And I do want to make that clear, but I kind of disagree with how far in they're leaning with the monetization model. I mean, I get why they're doing it, because that's what happens in WoW. They charge you a subscription, they charge you for the base game, and then they charge you for every expansion. And there's a shop for mounts and things like that, where again, more money. But this is not WoW, this is Diablo. And it remains to see really what else it has to offer. We ran into a lot of problems after the launch of D3 because things just fell apart after the limited beta test. So, you know, yeah, the big question I have left is where's the good stuff? Like, what am I going to encounter after that core leveling experience? Because quite frankly, I don't know, and I can't say it is positive or negative at this point. So, um, yeah, it it's just too much going on in terms of like the giant pool of unknowns. But anyway, if you stuck around this long through my ramblings, thank you very much. Um, Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like the content. I'll publish more. And yeah, um, stay safe, enjoy the game, and hopefully this helps you make a good purchasing decision for Diablo and kind of helps you along the way. So, see you later.